Turkish jets pound a Syrian border town in an effort to stop ISIL. The impeachment trial for Brazil's suspended President Dilma Rousseff begins, and China prepares to welcome world leaders for the G20 Summit. Big stories, and we'll tackle them all. Hello, I'm Nathan King, sitting in for Anna Naidu, and this is The Heat. Hello, it's time for our monthly journalist roundtable. We put together a distinguished panel for insight and analysis. Joining us now from our Washington, D.C. studio is Qingyi Qian. He's the White House correspondent and U.S. News Center chief editor for the Shanghai Media Group. And also with us is Yasmin Alamiri. She's the senior political reporter of the online publication Rare. And from Sao Paulo, we are joined by Leo Siqueira. He is the director of the Latin America with the AIM Group and a writer and analyst. And we're joined here also in the studio by Holger Stark. He's the bureau chief for Germany's leading news magazine, Der Spiegel, here in Washington, D.C. Welcome to you all. We've got lots to cover, obviously. A busy, busy week and busy month. Yasmin, we've seen in the Middle East Turkey make incursions into Syria to take on ISIL. This is what the US has wanted for some time. But what is behind this decision? Of course, Turkey very much a victim of terrorism at the moment.
Sure. I think the timing is quite interesting because Vice President Biden was just meeting with Turkish officials in Turkey this past week, and shortly thereafter we see this military incursion by Turkey, exactly as you say, that the U.S. has been wanting this for a while. So while it's a bit of a win for the U.S. And their policy towards the fight against ISIL, I think that there are ulterior motives there for Turkey as they're really beginning to target more Kurdish fighters, which they see as encroaching on their territory, and in their minds maybe equal of a threat as the threat against ISIS. So
pushing the Kurds back while dealing with ISIL as well.
Exactly. I mean, they can't avoid ISIS because they've seen the horrible attack on the wedding party, which was pinned to ISIS. So obviously they are absolutely victimized by ISIS crimes and terror, but it's not. They haven't forgotten about the Kurdish fighters. I think that's very much in the forefront of their mind when they launch this military
And that's
incursion.
interesting because the US have been partnering with Kurds to take on ISIL as well.
Absolutely. It's very much an interesting situation for the US.
Holger, as you know, as Yasmin said, we had US Vice President Biden in Turkey. Let's just have a listen to what he said.
We are determined to listen to every scrap of evidence that Turkey can provide or that we could find out about. But again, I say to the people of Turkey, what possible motive could we have to, in fact, harbor a terrorist?
According to the extradition of criminals treaty between the two countries, people like him would at least be taken under custody, arrested, and remain under arrest throughout the trial. This person continues to manage this terrorist organization from where he is.
Now, Holger, that exchange really about one thing, the aftermath of the coup attempt in Turkey and the extradition, if you like, of Fethullah Gulen, who is the opposition leader here, based, weirdly, some would say, in Pennsylvania. They want him to be extradited back. We could face the death penalty. That is a big wedge, isn't it, between the US and Turkey really piling on the pressure on this one?
Yeah, I mean, the United States have made clear that there is no evidence that Fethullah Gulen somehow backed the power coup. But nevertheless, I think the political price for the United States has been fairly high because they clearly took the side of the Turkish government, as you just saw with Joe Biden's visit in Ankara this week. And they decided to sideline with the Turks against the Kurds. And that's a high price because basically what we're seeing in northern Syria now is a second front. That's a front between the Kurdish fighters and the Turkish army. There has been kind of peaceful situation over the last month. The Kurds were the most effective battlefront in the fight against ISIS. Now the US has put a lot of pressure on the Kurds as well to support the Turkish ambitions, and I think on the long run that might be an extremely coastful move.
Yeah, because obviously both Turkey and the Kurds won't be fitting together very easily. I just want to pick up, Cheng, because let's widen it out. There have been terrorist attacks in Afghanistan this week as well. That attack on the American university. You know, the search for stability in Afghanistan is now no longer just a US problem, is it? It's widening out. China getting very much involved. What's the view from Beijing of the unstableness in Afghanistan right now?
Right. We know Afghanistan is a very important neighbor of China. They share borders, and including the ancient passage in Silk Road. So it's very important for China to get involved in an anti-terror effort in Afghanistan. So earlier this year, Chinese Chief of General Staff of PLA, Fang Fenghui, visited Afghanistan and proposed a four-nation anti-terror alliance, including China, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan. So that shows this four-nation has the same stake in the region in terms of anti-terrorism. So, and also, it's also the stability in the West Asia and Central Asia and South Asia is also very important for China's westward strategy, especially the
One Belt, One Road.
One Belt, One Road is very important for China. So we can see China is involved into the anti-terror effort in the region. That shows also China want to act as a responsible major power in the region.
Holger, also Europe hit by terrorism. We saw some figures this week that saw that tourism in France at this busy time down by 1 million people. Is that affecting the rest of the continent too, Germany?
Well, I think everybody is adjusting to that and probably has the assessment that this is on the middle term, long term, a problem that all European countries will face. As long as ISIS is so much under pressure, they try to export terror. They've set up an underground infrastructure with terrorist cells, and they will strike wherever they can. So the anti-terrorism battle in Europe is something that all European countries have to face and to deal with in the next upcoming years.
I'd like to talk more about this, but we have so much to pack in. We've got to move on to something very big in the Chinese orbit coming up next week, which of course is the G20 in Hangzhou. Leaders gathering from everywhere. What's like to be resolved or not resolved?
There will be plenty of deliverables in this upcoming G20 Summit in Hangzhou.
Which ones?
Just at the news conference, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lu Kang, he said this will be very likely the most fruitful G20 summit because it expects to reach more than 30 deliverables. This will be the most in the history of G20 summit.
And what are they focusing on exactly? Obviously, you need to kickstart economic growth globally, but there's also strategic issues as well.
Right. Especially the economic issue. We see this year the Hangzhou summit actually is set against the backdrop of heightened uncertainty of global economy and also the protectionism as we see from the Brexit vote and the Americans' aversion to Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, and so on and so forth. So this year's economic issue will be on the top of the agenda this time.
But there might be, if I may interject, I mean, there's some level of awkward encounters that I know people and some reporters like me are looking for. I know that there's been the issue of whether the president will be meeting with Putin during the G20 meeting and whether they'll be discussing the issue of cybersecurity, which continues to be an issue, I think, domestically here in the United States, and also maybe something that I'm sure within polite company will not be addressed, but whether the issue of Putin and his fast friend, the Trump administration, the Trump campaign chair will come up. And to be a fly on the wall, I think during those meetings, or maybe not, the meeting would be so interesting. And we'll see. I mean, I think these summits are also a good time for these world leaders who otherwise wouldn't be in touch with each other to see what they discuss.
Yeah, especially Obama, Putin, because they don't really meet anywhere else. Exactly. Leo, sorry, I want to bring you in from Brazil. Developing nations such as Brazil are being invited to look at the G20. What does it mean for that sort of representation at the new, basically, global grouping that sort of dictates where economic policy goes?
I think that especially for Brazil, that's a great opportunity, especially for interim President Michel Temer, to improve the country's image, that we're passing through impeachment trial, and everyone in Brazil is expecting, even the lefty party, the Workers' Party, is expecting Dilma to be finally impeached. So in Brazil, investors and the politicians in general are just waiting for this process to have an end. And I think that Brazil will try to show that the country is prepared to retake a growth, especially given the fact that the summit's topic has to do with global growth, with retake of the global growth. And I think that's the key message Brazil will try to address.
Holger, here in the studio, obviously it's also a grouping where you have Russia, Germany and France, the contact group on the Minsk so-called agreement when it comes to Ukraine. Any signs of a breakthrough with Angela Merkel there, François Hollande and Vladimir Putin?
No, I think that would be an overestimation. I think it's moving forward step by step. This crisis is definitely overshadowed by a lot of other issues like the Middle East. I think Angela Merkel's policy is going in really like tiptoeing small steps and trying to convince Putin. Putin, on the other hand, has a severe interest in lowering the sanctions. So they will try to get closer, but there will be no breakthrough.
Qingyi, Vladimir Putin we just talked about, but what about his relationship with President Xi Jinping? Meeting multiple times, we've seen a lot of emphasis on economic cooperation and increasingly security alignment, if not total cooperation. What do we expect of the G20 Summit when it comes to China, Russia?
Right, they have, as you mentioned, they met a dozen times for the past years and appear to have developed a personal friendship, which pushed the Russia and China's relationship to the new heights. And also, Putin this time will be the chief guest of the Hangzhou Summit. So they will have a bilateral meeting on the sideline of the G20. So I think they will discuss some results and some developments since Putin's last visit to China in June. So some of that development, as some experts expect, including South China Sea, East China Sea, and also the deployment of THAAD, anti-missile system in South Korea.
Yes, the terminal high altitude defense system that Beijing and Moscow have said actually threatens security beyond the DPRK and the Korean Peninsula, right?
Right. So that would be the topic probably they would discuss, and also the economic cooperation. We see the cooperation has boomed for the past decade, as we can see.
You know, China is obviously hosting this. This is
right.
a big conference. How much is that a good thing for China to project globally?
Yes, it's also as we can see that China previously has hosted several major events, and this time, especially as what I mentioned, it will be one of the most important diplomatic events of the year because we see the economic situation in the world and also other security issue happening around the world. So this time, this will be one of the most important events of the year. So China is really trying to present well and also to act as a responsible major power in the world.
Holger, last word before we go to break.
Well, it's interesting to see how much China invested. They issued a 1-week vacation so that ordinary citizens should leave the city. They went to every hotel and tried to avoid that terrorist suspects could come in. They closed churches, so they are doing really a lot of homework just to make sure that this is going to be a huge success.
Yeah, the security implications, of course, on such a gathering. Next up, though, we'll talk about illegal immigration to email scandals. We'll discuss the highs and very much the lows of the US presidential race. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat. Welcome back to The Heat. The fate of Dilma Rousseff's presidency in Brazil and the US presidential race continues to dominate headlines around the world. Let's get back to our panel. Let's go, of course, to Brazil. Leo Sequeira is with us still. Leo, we had a kind of nice break from Brazilian politics. The Olympics were quite an amazing feat, but now we're back. Dilma Rousseff's trial for manipulating financial figures about to start. Will she not be president? What's going to happen?
Well, even Dilma Rousseff herself has started to take her own belongings from the Planalto. So this is a clear indication that herself is not believing she will survive to this process. I think that we need to look beyond the impeachment process itself, because, you know, independently, if Temer becomes the new interim president, he's likely to face a lot of pressure, even from the main party which is supporting him right now, which is PSDB, that they just threatened PMDB and Michel Temer to leave them if they don't agree to forget an increase in the judge's wage. So there are some pressures that Temer are likely to face. And of course, Dilma and the left wing is just trying to look at the process and try to question the merits of the process, just in order to gain more time and maybe to try to keep them alive for the elections in 2018.
Because Temer is only not allowed to run in the presidential election, correct? He has 2 years for the term and there wouldn't be. Could you address that? And also, just generally, how destabilizing is this for Brazil, considering the economic downturn that they're having is the worst in decades?
Well, I think that's the clear challenge that Michel Temer has ahead. Investors are still somewhat not optimistic about the situation of Brazil, and in fact, most investors and even politicians, most companies in Brazil are just waiting for this process to have an end, so they can start planning and trying to start seeing a future. I think that the global economy and investors in general are not just sure about Brazil, and I think that the main challenge for Brazil is to show to the world that it can address its short-term challenges, both politically and economically.
Qingyi, China's invested tens of billions of dollars in Brazil, obviously looking to expand infrastructure where it does best. Will they continue to do so, and what are the gains that we've seen in Brazil so far?
Yeah, as you may know, in official Brazilian delegation is heading to China to meet its investor in China on the sidelines of G20 Summit. And the head of delegation said, you know, Brazil is facing a very serious crisis right now in the country, so they need huge investment from outside to boost its economy, and especially they hope China can invest more. And China already signed several important infrastructure projects with Brazil. One of the most important one is the high-speed railway in Brazil's two largest city, Rio, and in between Rio and Sao Paulo.
Which is going to be incredible if it works.
But it has been delayed because the economy situation in Brazil. But the two countries is trying to revive this project. And other than infrastructure, China has already invested in a lot of other fields, including oil, gas, and agriculture, and also the electricity power, etc. And that helped to enhance and improve the two countries' relationship. So this kind of investment will definitely help and also to enhance the cooperation between the two countries in the long run.
Yasmin, I have to ask you about the Olympics. What did you think?
I think they were great, and I think what it did for Brazil was it answered a lot of the questions and some of the planning processes. I mean, it was the beginning of the Olympic process. The opening ceremonies were against the backdrop of nonstop criticism of the sanitation of the country, and whether the Zika virus is going to, put a damper on the ceremonies. And it ended up in the end being a successful Seoul Olympic Games. And I think it kind of answered a lot of the questions that Brazil could pull this off without any major terrorist attacks or any major crime issues or anything like that. However, now they're going to be dealing with another PR issue of sorts with the impeachment of the president. So we'll see. But the Olympic Games, I mean, the soccer team took home a major gold, and that for them was, I think, the boost that they needed morally.
Yes, crime was so low they even had to make some crimes up, didn't they, the American swimmers? Anyway,
So
Holger, what do you think?
I liked the incident around the US swimmers, Ryan Lochte and others, because it reminded us that everybody might fail, even the best athlete from the most powerful country in the world. So that gave us some decency.
We're all human, you mean?
That's true.
Let's turn to the American election, which actually may be over by November. It's been going on for a long time. It's got really nasty, hasn't it, Yasmin?
It's been, I mean, the mudslinging is at a different level now. And I think, you know, what we saw yesterday was, I think, a disservice to American voters who really need to hear their candidates, no matter what your partisanship is, on the topics. And I think the trading of jabs on who's the bigger bigot is not really speaking to a true policy point that so many Americans right now need to hear about, which is the issue of race. And I think that, you know, just name calling on either side doesn't service anybody and is not helpful. But, I mean, there's a reason why we call this election season silly season, because the topics and the way that it's done between Twitter and Facebook posts and, you know, campaign rallies, it doesn't really speak to some of the major issues. And I think that the reason why a lot of us are looking forward to the debate is because it's a moderated discussion where the two candidates can actually speak on the subject rather than go off of their talking points, as I said, slinging mud at each other at their, you know, back-to-back campaign rallies.
That's about a month away, but Holger, before that, Hillary Clinton hasn't held a press conference in nearly a year. Where she actually gets asked pointed questions, not by moderators, but by journalists. Donald Trump seems to just sort of appear on TV shows and say exactly what he thinks, regardless of the questions. Why are both of these candidates not dealing with the media in ways that we've seen in the past?
Well, actually, I think both have their weaknesses, especially Hillary Clinton. She's not really good when it comes to live situations where she has to react on things that the audience or journalists asking them. And Donald Trump is an ego shooter par excellence, who never wants to respond to the agenda of other people, but just doing his own thing. But we've reached a very interesting point now. Trump is so much in a deep hole right now that he has to do something, and he basically decided to shift and turn around on some major issues. Deportation of illegal immigrants, for example, has been the latest.
I want to break you off there, because let's have a listen to his position.
We're going to obey the existing laws. Now, the existing laws are very strong. The existing laws, the first thing we're going to do, if and when I win, is we're going to get rid of all of the bad ones. We got gang members, we have killers, we have a lot of bad people that have to get out of this country. We're going to get them out, and the police know who they are. They're known by law enforcement who they are. We don't do anything. They go around killing people and hurting people, and they're going to be out of this country so fast your head will spin. We have existing laws that allow you to do that. As far as everybody else, we're going to go through the process.
Yasmin, the bad people, he's talking about illegal immigrants here, but he's also still sticking by vigorous vetting of people coming in who are essentially Muslims as well.
So as early as this morning, there were remarks from the Trump camp that they, in theory, this policy would be making all of the illegal immigrants leave and then come back through a vetted process. I mean, the practicality and the logistics and the money that this plan to even see it through, I don't think is even feasible. However, if this were to happen, he promises that if on day one, the first document that he would sign is getting the bad ones out, which he cryptically teases is something that police officers already know how to do, or law enforcement in the United States knows how to do. I mean, I don't know. The way that he's kind of phrased his immigration policy, if you will, has been even criticized by his most loyal supporters. Sarah Palin most recently has come out and said, look, this is kind of like a flip-flop. And so I don't know. I mean, I think that the Trump campaign needs to make up their mind on what their immigration stance is.
The polls show her with a 10-point lead, and also, especially in the swing states where you have to win. What's the view in China? Are they getting ready for a Hillary Clinton presidency, or are they still kind of like, wow, this Trump guy's different?
Well, it's really hard to say right now. Since I covered the 2008, 2012, and this year's election, it's really hard to predict what will happen. For example...
really? You think you still don't know what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Having covered those elections?
Look back at 2012. It was a close race. Mitt Romney might win, but...
Not that.
Because it's... but his 47th comment did hurt him, and then he lost the campaign. And this year, we still see WikiLeaks have promised they will release something harmful surrounding Hillary Clinton. We already see WikiLeaks released something that hurts the Democrat convention, especially the chairwoman. So it's really hard to say for now that who might win until November 8th.
October surprise, maybe. Leo in Brazil, how's all this looking from Brazil? I presume they think, well, the US system maybe is messed up, if not more than ours.
Well, I don't think that Brazilian relations with the U.S. will change, not at least in the short term. Of course, if Trump wins, which I doubt, Brazil would be more aligned with the U.S., since in Brazil we would have right-wing presidents at the office. But I don't think relations with Brazil will change, not at least in the short term. We need just to wait. As your previous guest commented, it's very hard to say, to predict. We have to wait and see and how this is gonna develop. But I don't anticipate any change in the U.S.-Brazil relations in the short term.
Leo, while I have you there, we're going to end with, what do you think the next big story is going to be? You've got 30 seconds of what we're going to look out for the next month.
Well, I think the big story will be how interim President Michel Temer will handle politics, as he's facing pressure from the main party supporting him, and how he's going to address the short-term economic and political problems that Brazil has.
Holger? Next big story for you?
Look at more leaks to come in the US presidential race, what we just mentioned a little bit. WikiLeaks published the Democratic Party mails already. There's more in the pipeline. That might be the wild card in the presidential race over the next 8 weeks.
Yes, me.
I think for me it really has to be race and politics. I think we have not heard the last of this. It was dismissed as a fringe issue and a political tactic and tool up until this point. And I think there are so many voices that still need to be heard. And these presidential candidates and whoever the next administration is needs to address them in earnest. This is a big issue facing American society right now.
Which could also hang over past November, obviously.
Absolutely.
Qingyi.
Of course, G20 Summit in Hangzhou, the most splendid city in Marco Polo's eyes.
Beautiful.
It's a beautiful city. And also, it will be the last visit by President Obama to China. This will be the third one and last one for him. So we will see what's going on there.
Quite a legacy on US-China relations, both hopeful and not so hopeful as well. For me, the TPP is the big one, Trans-Pacific Partnership, especially in the next couple of months. If they can't get it through a lame duck session of Congress after the election, it's probably going to be dead. And the implications of that for the US policy in Asia, the rebalance, the pivot, are going to be quite tremendous. So it's going to be very interesting. Thanks for a great discussion. We always love doing this once a month. Thanks so much. And thanks for watching at home. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Nathan King in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.